For decades, the term to the trade meant high style, exclusivity, and limited availability. It connoted a rarefied world curated by designers, with even the most discerning and wealthy clients denied access to the very best products without a designer guide. It was enticing, but also confusing to outsiders, with custom orders, long lead times, and the mysteries of net versus list pricing. Design centers could seem to the public like fortresses protecting a very particular old-school way of doing business. What was behind the curtain? But in the face of the internet, with so much information about design and products available at everyone's fingertips, and with social media broadening the appeal of design every day, what does to the trade mean at this moment? Is its exclusivity still meaningful? And does it help or hinder the process of creating great design? I have with us today three people who know the ins and outs of to the trade from every angle. First is David Sutherland, the founder of the preeminent outdoor furniture, rug, and fabrics company, Sutherland Furniture and Perennials Fabrics. After opening his first showroom in Houston in 1977, he launched Sutherland Furniture in 1991, working with John Hutton and focusing on furnishings and accessories for outdoor spaces. He then branched out into fabrics in 1997 with Perennials, working with his beautiful and talented wife, Anne, who serves as CEO. The companies are now represented at more than 40 to the trade showrooms around the globe, though David has experimented with direct-to-consumer sales as well. Hello, David.
Hi, Michael. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm also pleased to welcome Katie Miner, the general manager of Adac, located in the prestigious Buckhead community of Atlanta, which she joined in 2012. Created in 1961 by visionary architect and developer John Portman, Adac was acquired in 2018 by International Market Centers, the world's largest operator of showroom space for the furnishings, home decor, and gift industries. Today, Adac and Adac West encompasses more than 550,000 square feet of luxury furnishings for residential, hospitality, and contract projects, and is one of the most active design centers in the country. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me.
So glad you're here. I'm also delighted to have with us Los Angeles designer Joe Lucas. Joe started his firm Lucas Studio with his then business partner Parrish Chilcote in 2005 after they worked together for Michael S. Smith. The film quickly became known for its warm, relaxed, and high-style rooms on both coasts. In 2008, they opened Harbinger, a multi-line design showroom on La Cienega Boulevard. Joe became sole owner of both companies in 2015. Harbinger now represents more than 50 lines of fabric, furnishings, and lighting, including Merida Studio, Katie Ritter, Amanda Nisbet, Hector Finch, Idarica Gazzoni, as well as his own Harbinger collection of furniture. Joe's an active force in the La Cienega Design Quarter and is a champion of the Legends of La Cienega Design Days each spring. Hello, Joe.
Hi there.
So, David, I want to start with you because you are represented, your Sutherland and Perennials have, as I said, represented 40 showrooms. Why do you think it's important for you to stay to the trade? I know you did a little experiment with Restoration Hardware. I'm sure you got some stick about that at the time, but I'd love to know why you think being in showrooms is still important.
Well, I think it depends a lot on the type of fabrics or the type of products that you have. What I have on my showroom floors, for the most part, are samples. They're not something that I readily deliver from the floor because once I deliver something from the floor and it's absent from view from the designers, sure enough, somebody comes in and wants 5 of them and it's not on the floor. So my whole take on the to the trade business is that we're not there to deliver from the floor. We're not instant gratification. We're there to offer alternative dimensions, alternative finishes, so many different aspects of what makes an interior designer's project unique.
And do you find that people, when they come in, because the most design centers, including Adac, are open to the public. So do you find that people are confused by that if they're not coming with a designer? You know, people say, oh, I want that. And you have to say, no, you can't have it.
Well, I hope not. We always encourage the public, and we encourage our designers to encourage their clients to come to our showroom. We just won't write orders to them. It's our goal, and always has been and always will be, to deal with professionals. Just because somebody can buy doesn't mean they're going to get a good job. I think that the design career is not as well respected as I would hope. A lot of people just think it's a matter of buying something, but to create an interior that's meaningful requires so many other aspects of creativity and not just the ability to purchase.
Right. And that's been one of my bugaboos is that, people think they hire a designer to get access to product. And, my response to that is, go to a fabric showroom and good luck because, any good fabric showroom is going to have, hundreds, if not thousands of samples there. But Joe, you must get that because your showroom, Harbinger, first of all, it's beautiful. It's right on the street. It's very welcoming. So how do you deal with that? Do you think most of the people who walk in, designers aside, of course, who understand the process, do they understand that? Are they frustrated?
It's interesting because in LA, Harbinger is on the street, so we definitely get a little bit more retail in there. We don't get a ton of retail. It really just depends on the day. These days, I feel like we'll certainly get people who wander in or have been sent by their designer if they're actually working with somebody. So they come in, we will sell to the retail. Obviously, we prefer the trade, but it just depends on what they're there for. We have a lot of things that are sort of ready to go and can be bought off.
Right, you have a lot of accessories, you have antiques.
We have accessories and art and antiques and vintage and pieces like that. But then it gets a little trickier when they come in and they're like, "Ooh, I want to do this table," and then you explain, "Well, this table can be done in any finish, any Benjamin Moore color you want. And do you want brass or do you want this?" And then they start to get a little confused and they'll tend to just sort of order what we have on what they can see, what's on the floor. Well, like, can I just get the same one here? And to David's point, it's that tricky thing where obviously we always would love if it's something in our reproduction line or one of the repped lines, we would love to keep what's on the floor and take an order. But a lot of the times these days, we really just need to, if they need it right then, we'll sell it right then. And, we'll get something else mixed in because I think the thing with Harbinger is I'm a mix of so many different companies and lines that we can do that and get away with a piece missing. Whereas, your showroom, David, I think it's so set because it's all of your pieces. So it really is that whole story. The difference in New York with Harbinger New York is we are in the New York Design Center at 200 Lex. So it's a much smaller showroom. We represent a much, much smaller amount of pieces and lines, and we'll really get mostly to the trade. Although 200 Lex does have the occasional retail person just sort of wandering in or checking things out and snooping around. So, we sort of have both worlds.
Now, Katie, I was intrigued to see that right on the Adac website, it does say fairly prominently open to the public.
Absolutely.
So how do you navigate that? Because I do think that social media, maybe you disagree with me, has created this idea that everybody has access to everything. But how do you navigate that? I know at like many design centers, they will put you in touch with a designer if you're really interested. How does it work at Adac?
Well, it's a couple of things. I mean, you're exactly right that the reason that we opened to the public was because more people had access to design, and whether or not that was just internet and eventually social media, especially Instagram, coming along, it's when we decided we needed to get more people into the center to see the brands, things they weren't going to see at a retail level, and have an interest in having those things in their home. But one of the things we explain right off the bat is, even though we're open to the public, that does not mean that the showrooms sell directly to the public. Now, some finished product. We have some linen showrooms or kitchen showrooms that have in-house designers, but the majority of the products sold at Adac is going to be sold and transacted through the interior designer only. And one way that we explain that to help maybe a general consumer better understand is to say, there's so much product at Adac that's unfinished, like fabrics, or it's furniture that's very high end, or just very highly customizable. You could have a chandelier with 20 gold finishes, and you really want the interior designer to help you navigate that process so that you don't make a costly mistake. So that's where an interior designer is your friend to get you through the process. And that seems to click when we're explaining that to a general consumer coming in.
And do you have a list of designers that you refer people to? How does that work?
We think that Adac is unique in that, and more design centers are starting to do this, but we have 27 design and architecture offices located on our campus at Adac. And we started...
Which is a beautiful campus, so no wonder people want to work there.
Thank you. As they come into that center every single day, then they are always going into the showrooms. They're shopping the showrooms, so they know the center best. Well, if a consumer comes in, we can easily refer them to any of those 27 design and architecture offices. We have ASID on campus and IIDA, who also have some matching services, which we'll refer them to, especially the ASID ones on the website, very easy. And then, of course, we can point to different things like social media and websites to get a feel for the designer, to see if it's in your right, maybe this is the right aesthetic for you, or you like the projects they're doing.
Right. And Joe, what about you? Do you have people who come in and see the showroom and then hire you as a designer, since you are the designer and I'm right, not all the time, but you're basically right there?
It would be amazing if it happened more. It's actually only happened, I think, maybe once or twice where that has fully come in. But I've certainly help some people out with little things here and there if I'm there. I'm not always in the showroom, but my design office is in the back in LA as well. So it is helpful if a client or someone retail comes in and is asking my team more information about an antique or backstory on where I found something. And if I'm around, then I definitely come out and then I get chatting. And a lot of the times it's me going through my phone and bringing up pictures of a piece that we might have used in one of my projects and being able to show, we did this sofa, we did it in this fabric, and it looks amazing, and they can't picture it. So I show them, and then all of a sudden they get it. So it's a little bit more of that.
Right. Well, it's been interesting to me that, during the pandemic, well, even before the pandemic, but especially during the pandemic, there was this talk that because of the internet and social media, that to the trade was going to die out, that, people didn't want to have to deal with the complex processes, dealing with the people, all of that. And that because there were different sites, including Chairish with all the vintage furniture that it has, and it does represent, the lacquer company and stuff, things that are sold at different design shops and in design centers. But there are brands like Fabricut and Clarence House that have pulled back from any distribution outside of the trade centers. And I do know that, for example, the New York Design Center is fully booked. There's no more space there. And apparently there are many other brands that want to come in the Design Center. And so, David, I'd love to get a sense from you why you think that's happening. I know, you did that thing with Resto. Why did you do that? And what were the results of it? And why are you still basically to the trade?
I'm really glad you asked that, because crossing over into retail was quite a quandary at the time we were discussing it. We were approached by Restoration Hardware to do a select group of fabrics to their designs in our materials, and of course we were flattered. And in the beginning, that's how we started with them, was doing unique fabrics for them. And as we decided to go into it, I can't tell you how many people in the design trade, designers, came to me and said, "Oh, thank you, because I buy a lot of Restoration Hardware, but they don't have the fabrics that I want." So I got more compliments and more of a collaboration out of Restoration Hardware than I ever anticipated. I had one designer over the course of our time with Resto who asked me to give them the same price. And I said, well, when you buy hundreds of thousands of yards, we'll give it to you. So, it's, and we do private label for a few other companies, much smaller companies. But in every situation, we've had designers come in and say, oh, thank you for offering your fabrics at XYZ because we buy a lot of that for kids' rooms. We buy a lot of that for outdoor areas. We buy a lot of it for areas where the budgets just aren't in the perennials level. And while Restoration Hardware sells very little by the yard, most of what we sell to them goes on their showroom floors and their catalogs and is sort of graded in with their furniture. They do from time to time sell a little bit, but they don't have enough of our collection. They may have 100 SKUs. We have 1,000 SKUs. So we've been very, very successful with that relationship and very proud of it.
Right. But he also, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but also he did sort of, when he emphasized you and Anne in the catalogs, I mean, I think he was taking a little bit of your, reputation and applying it to Resto, which is what he should be doing. But I think, it does bring up this idea of exclusivity, what's available to people and how available should things be. And Katie, I'd love to get your take on this. How much direct consumer could a brand do before you feel they're not appropriate for a design center anymore?
Well, I think really more than anything is the pricing, because we always have to protect the interior designer. So, we do have some showrooms that we call two-tier, and it's all about the pricing. They have a retail price that if you come in, and obviously the showrooms and salespeople have ways of figuring out if a person is working with a designer or if they are a designer and whatnot. And so if it's clear that they're not working with a designer and they need to give them retail pricing, they give them that pricing versus save the discount for the trade only and really protecting the trade. So those showrooms that are at Adac that sell to the public, whether or not it's because they have in-house designers that somebody can work with, or whether or not it's that they have that two-tier pricing, that's our delineation that we say you have to have both. And more than anything, you can never, ever, ever sell to a consumer at anything less than that retail price. And they get to make up what that retail price is. I mean, that's their decision based on their company, but it just needs to be, the discount needs to be reserved for the trade only. And that really protects all of Adac and all the rest of the showrooms that are there, because there's trust in the designer knowing Adac and those showrooms are protecting me.
But I know that a lot of designers now are thinking or starting or are doing billing in a different way. I mean, I had David Netto on the podcast, and he said, I just do a flat fee, a certain percentage, whatever. He says, because I feel, especially his very successful clients, don't want to be nickeled and dimed with, this was list, that was net, every invoice for every single item, whatever. And he would prefer to do it that way. So do you think, Joe, I'd love to get your sense on this, since you're both a designer and a showroom person. Do you think that net list pricing thing is the wave of the future, or do you think it's going to last, or is it on its way out?
I think I would love it to last, because I do think it protects the designer for sure. It does always get a little tricky. We definitely have some designers like David. I know that he's come in and he has occasionally, some of his clients will buy direct. He'll pick everything out and he'll go, okay, they're going to send a check. And there are other designers who do that as well. And sometimes it just depends on the project. Sometimes it depends on the piece. I do that to some of my design clients, depending on what it is. If it's, if I'm buying 4 or 5 rugs from a big rug dealer or something, and that becomes a huge high ticket thing, then I'll just say, you know what, pay them direct. We'll charge we'll charge the markup separately, or just our hourly for something. It always depends, but I would love the trade pricing to stay if we can. It's trickier for Harbinger, again, because we have, a number of vendors that we represent that are very specifically to the trade, and they have only their net pricing, and they don't even have a retail pricing. Some of our fabric lines, when we're like, okay, well, what's your retail price, so that we can give it to people if they come in off the street and they're like, we don't even have one. So, sometimes it's just figuring out what the margin is, and we multiply it, by a number, and then we sort of get that retail price. It's trickier for the showrooms, I think, because you start taking discounts away, and then that affects our commissions because we're there to make some money too, and so we have set commissions with the lines that we represent. You start giving discounts to certain people who aren't supposed to get them, then all of a sudden the vendor might come back, okay, well, can you go down on your commission on that? And then it's a whole nother thing. So it is tricky. It's very tricky. And as a designer, sometimes you'll go into certain retail stores that are definitely to the trade, but very much more retail based. And we might only get 10% off, where, you go to Harbinger and it's 20% off the trade price, and other places are 30. And that's where the clients are always like, well, why is it only 10% off there? So does your markup go down? It's the crazy. I mean, how everybody does their pricing has always been the bane of the existence of the interior design world, as we know.
Well, I guess it comes back again to this idea of how does the design industry sell its expertise? Because being a designer, as we were saying, is not being a personal shopper. There's so many hundreds of decisions to make, and I always say it's also a matter of engineering, making sure everything gets delivered at the same time and not in dribs and drabs, and you can do the. I mean, it's such a complex thing being a designer, and yet I don't think that the industry has made it had a great success in conveying that to the public. And I'd love to get a sense, Katie, from you, how do you think that a design center can help with that? I mean, I know you do marketing and you do social media. And a designer said to me recently, what they wish design centers would do is help them more with marketing and social media. So how does Adac approach that?
I think that's one of the things that we think is very unique, that we have such an investment in our marketing team. And we have so many stories that we constantly need to tell whenever we're out in the public, whether or not it's any kind of media I'm doing or an event that we're doing or social media. But one of the most important stories that we're constantly telling is the value of hiring an interior designer. And we feel like that is an important thing that as the management office is that we're out there telling that story. And we want people to come into Adac, see the product, maybe get a little overwhelmed, realize, wait, this is a lot to navigate. I mean, Adac is 5 floors in one building alone, and it's 550,000 square feet of product. So it's very overwhelming, and we want them to get overwhelmed, but also at the same time to see what's out there, what's in the design center to decorate their home, because there's so much they won't see at the retail level. So it is a bit of an epiphany when they come in, and maybe they've worked with an interior designer before and they realize, okay, now I understand what they're doing. But yes, that is one of the stories that we are constantly telling in any way that we possibly can, is the value of hiring an interior designer.
Right. And you also, in terms of getting the public in to understand, I know you have special design days, you have lectures, you do social media,
so we are going to do, prior to COVID, we were at about 150 events throughout the year, but also in our 10-state region. So we're the largest design center in the Southeast, and we bring designers in from all the major cities, Nashville and Charleston and Charlotte, that surround Adac. So it's not just Atlanta. And we found that events is that really easy way to bring in both the client and the designer. The designer's going to come in we have everything from market days, 2 markets a year, but we also have educational days that are specifically for the designer. But then we also have just any event that's open to the public and free to attend, that's going to try to inspire somebody who's coming in for the first time, maybe in a way that they feel more comfortable. Maybe they're a little intimidated just to walk into Adac, but if they come to an event that's hosted by a brand, a showroom at Adac, and maybe a magazine partner, that makes it really easy for them to sit in that audience and start to learn a bit more and maybe get a little more comfortable with the design center, and then take that next step as well.
And Joe, you're a great host. I mean, you're always often have, besides LCDQ, which is like one big, frat party for the design industry. You have book signings and all kinds of events. Do you think that really helps get the word out that people, because there is something very inspiring about seeing beautiful product.
I do.
In terms of fabrics touching them.
Yeah, it's just nice to get people into the showroom too, especially after the last 2 years that we've been through. I think that events are even more important now. And even if it just ends up being the design trade that comes to these events, it's still a great way to get people back in to see new product, to see things in person, to see how the showrooms have mixed things up.
David, you have well-known brands. I mean, Perennials and Sutherland are very well known in the design world. And I think, Perennials was one of the first outdoor fabric companies. Now it seems like everybody has their line of outdoor fabrics. Competition is good, but it can be a pain in the butt as well. So I'd love to get a sense from you, like, how do you decide where you're going to open a showroom? What do you want from the design centers that you work with? What are you looking for to further awareness and appreciation of Sutherland Furniture and Perennials?
That's a great question. I will tell you that our focus for it currently and for the future is to add additional outside salespeople to go to the designers to make sure that they have our materials and to know that we're there to support them. The major markets are really the only places you'll find the design centers. There's some smaller ones from time to time you hear about, but there are new markets. The demographics of the country are changing.
And there's talented designers all across the country.
Yes, they are. And I would never have believed that, that Charlotte or Nashville or Naples or some of these, what we used to call tertiary markets would become so important. But
first-class talent in a tertiary market. It's kind of amazing. I learned that when I went to Deering Hall originally, how much talent there is in the country.
Exactly. But, it's interesting because a lot of designers, I have several friends in Chicago, for instance, that are opening in Naples. So people are kind of going after the business, and which I think is very smart. It's quite interesting to see. It's not just the end users, but the designers as well, who are relocating. Maybe it's for tax reasons, maybe it's for whatever. But some of those southern cities are becoming real marketplaces. They're not something you can ignore anymore.
We did a Chairish podcast episode about where people are moving. And, Naples, I think, is the number one housing market at the moment. The most,
right. And our
growing.
New showroom will open there in about 2 weeks.
Great. Congratulations. Very smart move.
Thank you.
Well, it's sort of that thing where, you always have to remind the end consumer that designers will travel anywhere. I feel like back in the old days, it was okay. If you were a New York designer, you only did New York projects unless you were a higher echelon of budget where that client would then, fly you out to wherever they were doing their next project. But these days, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I've got to get somebody local, but we'll go anywhere and do projects all over the place, and things change as far as how we price that. Maybe, I mean, I could care less where a project is. It's the same thing, and especially the fact that you can do so much over the internet now. And we've had Zoom meetings. It's not the same, of course, but it's great for that initial meeting. If we need to be able to show the general idea, if you can't get the client out in person, and then you do that next meeting in person, so it's much easier to be everywhere.
And I know, like on your website, you have beautiful projects not only in the East Coast but in Montana, around the country. And I think that is sort of true, and which I guess David brings up, that reinforces the point that you made about reaching out to designers directly, making sure that they have your sample books, make sure they understand how you work and whatever. But do you think, and Katie, I'll ask you this, do you think that will then undermine the importance of a design center?
To me, I actually do not, because I think one of the most important things, like I said, we have a 10-state region. So those cities, like David was saying, Nashville and Charlotte, that have such talented designers that are also growing. There's so many people that are moving to those cities and wanting interior designer. And so we are going out into those cities to connect with them, but we're taking the sales reps, like Sutherland sales reps, and then we may do an event in Nashville with the Sutherland sales reps, so that we're making sure that the designer's not only having to come to Adac to be a part of our community, but we're going to be a part of their community in their city. And we found that we've made such huge and very important relationships, and that started before COVID. And then ultimately what may end up happening is that they may come over to Adac to see more of the product because they could only see so much with a sales rep. So maybe they need to sit in that chair or whatever, maybe they've got a huge project and they need to spend about 2 days at Adac. We know they're going to do that while they're still working with their sales reps in the individual city.
We've had clients who were so busy, they just, if we didn't call on them, we probably wouldn't get any of their business because many designers have said to me that they don't really have time to go to a showroom. They're that busy. And I think that's been part of what we've seen over the last year and a half is that in many cases, good designers are swamped.
Right. And it's human nature. If it's not in front of your face, you tend to forget, it's like, and then you see it and say, I haven't ordered from Perennials or X brand in 6 months. I should check and see, that would be good for this project because it's almost like hiring somebody. You always hire somebody who just happens to send their resume at that moment. So you happen to have presented as, new products to a designer and they think about it. I mean,
when a designer comes to the showroom, they're not there to tell you about their projects. But if you're an outside salesman and your eyes are open, you walk into a design firm, you can see a lot of the stuff they're working with. It's not that you're there, sort of spying on them, but you certainly have an opportunity to talk about other projects. And, that's just a given. I mean, that's the value of an outside salesperson is not that they just sell one thing, but that they can bring other things to the designers that perhaps the designer wasn't looking for at that time.
And Joe, I think you do that. I mean, one of the things I love about your showroom is that you have a lot of smaller, almost artisanal brands, like Adac, who I just love to say her name. But
Yes,
I mean, she does
do.
amazing fabrics. And, I've actually went to her showroom, her little shop in Milan, and she has beautiful things. And I think you do that a lot is bringing smaller makers to people's attention. And, do you feel that they tend to get lost in the shuffle more when it's like with the bigger as compared to the big design centers?
They do. Yeah, it depends on the line.
Because I mean, it's expensive to rent space in a design center.
It's very expensive. And I think I get those smaller lines because of the way that Harbinger is set up and that it's a much more eclectic showroom. So they can mix in well. But occasionally, I'll get smaller textile lines wanting to join the group. And then that line has to be really, really special for me to say yes, because I want to be honest to them. If it's something that's going to blend in too much with all of the other lines that I have, it's not going to be seen. People aren't going to get it. And so I say to them, I'm like, look,
why do you need it?
I love that your line is small, but it's just, I'm not going to waste your time. If you can be at a showroom where it's going to stand out more, then I want you to do that, because I don't want to say, yes, you're going to do great here, and then all of a sudden it blends in. So, I mean, we've mixed up the way that we show our fabrics because of that very reason, where some of the lines that should have been doing gangbusters weren't, and it was because they weren't, you couldn't see the patterns well enough. But we do have a lot of mix of those. We've got some great, furniture makers and accessory makers from upstate New York and all over the place that mix in with the rest of the lines. And that just depends on, they're going to sell well when it's like installation time and the designer's coming through memoing just a bunch of pieces to bring to that installation when it's finally time to move in. And that's when like our ceramics move well, and the lamps and the side tables and the vintage pieces, that sometimes I'll see them sitting there for a month or two going, I wish those would sell. And then one day, one designer comes in and takes 70% of the showroom out and 50% of it stays, which is a great day. But all of a sudden then I'm like, oh God, I got to go shopping.
Right, exactly. You got to come up with new stuff. Katie, how does Adac deal with keeping things fresh? Because you have a lot of well-known brands there, important brands, not to say that they're not creative and beautiful, but you don't want to have a designer come every 3 months and everything is sort of the same. So do you encourage the brands that you represent that have real estate there to
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I
keep
was
things
just
fresh?
thinking,
How does that work?
it really is so important to every design community, design center to have showrooms like David's and like Joe's, because you want to have a Harbinger that's going to bring in all of these maybe smaller companies or artisans or smaller makers that they're not going to ever take their own showroom. They, in a design center, you're right, it's not, cheap. And so if we know that we have an independent showroom like a Harbinger coming in and they're going to represent all of those lines, that keeps more and more interesting, unique brands coming through. But then you also want to have an equal mix of your brand showrooms that have showrooms at every design center, like David does, and having a good mix of both of those is very important to our design community. But then, of course, on top of that, like you were saying, you want to make sure that those showrooms are constantly updating their showroom display, changing over product. We have a couple at Adac that do it really, really well. They change over their product often. They might have, music that plays. They might send out a Spotify, listening, monthly listening playlist. They might have a scent, special scent. They're going to do every single thing that they can to make themselves exclusive. And so the other showrooms see that and might, take a little bit of information from that one and use that. And so they stay unique in their own identity, but there's that wanting to create that experience within the showroom. If others around them are doing that, then they realize that they need to do it too. So it really keeps things fresh at Adac.
Well, I think shopping in general, retail and or, to the trade changed so much in the last 10 years, really way before the pandemic, but that's, I think, accelerated it. But I'd love to get a sense from each of you, and we'll maybe start with you, David. We've had 2 boom years in the design industry. People were stuck at home. They spent on getting houses in shape, making their homes better. Even if they had to wait 18 months, 22 months for some things, it was like they were into it. Now people are up and about more, traveling more. How do you see the trade business proceeding in the year ahead? Do you think there's going to be a slowdown? Do you think business is going to continue the way it is? Do you think there's going to be a change and people are going to do more things, online? What do you see happening?
I definitely see a slowdown. I don't think it's going to continue at the pace that it did during the pandemic. There's no question about it. Ourselves, we have a lot of containers that are still in transit. We have a backlog that'll probably carry us into the middle of next year. But that creates delays for people on their projects. And anyone who says if they buy anything in other parts of the world that the supply chain is repaired, they're not very active. So I think that things are going to slow down quite a bit. From my perspective, if I may, Katie, I apologize here if this isn't correct, but the design centers are in the real estate business. The showrooms are in the showroom business. They're dealing with the designers on a day-to-day basis. And not necessarily in Atlanta, but certainly in other parts of the country, the costs of being in a design center have escalated to the point where atelier lines that are represented, like Joe has, a lot of them are not going to find a venue if the space is too expensive, because by and large, commission rates haven't grown. The only way a showroom can increase their revenues is to increase their sales. There is no greater portion of the cost of the product that goes into the rep's pocket. And I contend that unless a showroom has access to their own products, as Joe does, it's very, very hard in this day and age to offset the expenses and to make a profit if you don't have something in there that you manufacture yourself, that you no longer is a commission enough to be in a very valuable showroom space.
Well, as one of our our original founder, one of the things that he used to say to us, and I not only worked with him at Adac, but I also worked at our sister property for 13 years prior to that and sort of grew up with the family that eventually was acquired by IMC. But the one thing that he used to say to us every single day was, we are not just a landlord. We are a marketing company. We are a marketing center. And so you're right. We have to bring value to you. It's the only reason that you would continue to stay at a design center and be able to pay the rent. I mean, obviously the critical mass and being with the easy one-stop shop is important, but at the same time, we still have to bring you value. And
Perfect.
So that's why we have a team of 7 in our marketing department. And even some of the small design centers around the country really work hard at that marketing component of it, because they realize that's the only reason that we're going to be able to keep these showrooms in business if we're promoting your product, if we're promoting the value of hiring an interior designer. Again, so many stories we're constantly telling. And then that way that designer has the project, they're going to come to the design center and buy. And ultimately, yes, you are able to continue paying the rent, because we're all in it to for revenue and to make a profit here, but we all have to bring the value at the same time. Otherwise, it won't work.
And it does seem like all the design centers are basically
many of them are
at capacity. So clearly, it seems like people are getting the money worth. But I think that you raised such an interesting point, David. How much longer can this continue? It's in New York City, people can't afford to rent anymore, even apartments. I mean,
I've always heard that an increasing share of a declining market is still death. So,
right.
It feels good to be taking market share, and we've been doing that during these times. But there has to be, it would seem, an end to that at some point.
Yeah. And Joe, what do you think about this? And how do you see your business in 2 years in terms of the showroom? I know you're going to only get richer and more fabulous clients for your design work, but
I don't know about that. But here's hoping. I'll crack some champagne if that happens. But I do think I agree with David. I think it's going to slow down a bit. We're starting to see that. We had a slower July and got a little bit worried, and then all of a sudden August bumped back up, and I had to remind myself, okay, it's summer, everybody's gone, the clients are gone, so then the designers are slow, and the designers go on vacation too. And if you watch everybody on Instagram, everyone's in Europe. So but I think it's coming back. Obviously, as I said before, there is a certain level of clientele and the designers who work with really big budgets where that does not seem to be slowing down because they can keep spending. But you start to see the slowdown in the smaller amounts of things. So, and I think it's also the supply chain will affect it. I mean, David, I wonder. I can only imagine if you're in the same position of just getting the yarns for the outdoor fabrics, like umbrellas, having a lot of issues where some of our outdoor lines that carry that they're having a hard time getting the product in there. So it just delays it. And then, of course, it's where do people go to get? We still need the outdoor fabric for that piece of furniture that we're ordering. Where do we get
Perennials
it?
Perennials with 90% in stock.
Are you? Good to know. Well, that becomes the bigger thing. So it's then finding ways to get around that to make sure that things are in stock. So, I just went and did another big buying trip in Europe a month and a half ago, and hopefully the things will actually not take 4 years to get to me. But if things are slower to make the product that are the newer pieces, then at least I'll have some vintage mixed in to be able to fill the space in the showroom. And
I bought in France in January and just received the shipment yesterday.
Oh, don't tell me that. My container goes on. My container goes on the water in about two days, and I'm just hoping it's a little bit faster this time. But
that's when your troubles really start.
I know. I'm gonna go grab an oar and start helping them get the boat here faster. There's always going to be business for someone and something. It might just go a little bit smaller, and you have to get clever. It's about the marketing. It's about what the marketing does at the design centers and getting people on the street in LA for our little world at La Cienega. So fingers crossed.
just a little anecdote in 2008 when everything was going south. I happened to be on a boat with some friends in the Bahamas, and I'm sitting there in the lap of luxury, staying pretty well soused every day because I was concerned about the future for our business because every aspect of it had gone down. And I got up one morning, and as I came up from below, the stewardess handed me a glass of rosé, and I said, here are these people that I'm fortunate enough to be with in this fabulous environment. They're not worried about it. Why am I worried about it? And so I postulated a theory that I've stuck with from then on, and that is that money's like energy. It never goes away. It just changes hands. So with that in mind, all I could do was say, okay, where'd it go? And when will those people be in the showroom? And it was such an empowering thing to realize that this is just another pond in the stream, another rock in the stream. I mean, this is something you just find a way to go around and continue on. And so these times have happened before. I'm told I went through 7 recessions in Texas in the 1980s. I don't doubt it. But each time we came out stronger. We stayed with what we were doing. We were committed to our direction, and we're very fortunate to come out way ahead of what we went in.
So I guess what I take from our conversation is that the idea of what a design center is for some people has changed, but that there will always be design centers and to the trade showrooms, because I think there will always be that clientele who wants custom, who wants the best. But I think that maybe to expand that market, the marketing that the design centers do is kind of crucial, and all the events and lectures and panels and book signings are probably even more important than they ever were. And it's something that the small brands that like Joe represents, or some of the showrooms at Adac, they're not going to have that without this sort of centrifugal force of a design center. So I guess you would all agree that design centers are here to stay?
One of the things we said, we started saying during the pandemic was design doesn't stop. And, we have been through these ebbs and flows over the years. I've gone through 3 of them myself. And so, but like you were saying, David, you just sort of figure out how to navigate that one. You learn a lot from it, and then you move on. And yes, there's the great times that come afterwards, and it's always going to ebb and flow. And you just have to figure out how to navigate each one because they're going to be unique.
Yeah. And I think it's the reminder of people still want to see things in person, and they want to touch and feel, and they want to sit on a sofa and see what it looks like in a room. And, you need to be able to see a carpet, an antique carpet in person, and touch the fabrics and stuff. So getting people in to see something is crucial. And you can only bring so many things to a designer's office too, but eventually they're going to have to show the client in the long run. And, pieces of things like Instagram that gets the marketing out there and gets the smaller products. I think that's the biggest thing for the smaller lines, is that Instagram gets it immediately out there, and people think, oh, I can do all this. I can shop from here. But how many times have we bought clothes, on the internet and think, oh, this is a slam dunk, this is going to be amazing. And all of a sudden it comes and you try it on and you're like, wow, those are skinny jeans. Right. And I can fit in that kind of thing. And then you get lazy and then you don't return it. I mean, I have like a stack of things that I haven't returned for 3 months. So I guess I own them now. So I like to go in and, try on clothes in person still. I'm the nerd who's still going in there and still going into shops.
And I think people want to know what their options are. Yeah. That there are things out there in those showrooms that I could never have imagined, things that are so beautiful. I'm not a designer. But I think if people get exposed to that and it excites them, and I think that's one reason that showrooms are here to stay, because just like, a great showroom is like going to Bergdorf, it's like it lifts you up, and it just shows you how much creativity there is out there in the world. And, you guys make it and find it. And that's, I think, very, very inspiring to the design world. So I guess it's safe to say to the trade, it's going to evolve, continue to evolve, but it's here to stay. Right?
Absolutely.
No question about it.
Great. Well, I want to thank my wonderful guests, Joe Lucas, Katie Miner of Adac, and David Sutherland for being here and talking about a really important subject. And I want to thank everyone for listening to the Chairish podcast.